Welcome, everybody, to the Mind, Body, Spirit Network video podcast series. And we're here every week. We're going to be interviewing one of our expert guest members and ask them to share their key insights into their field of specialty, whatever that may be, in the realm of mind, body, spirit. So, hello, my name is Liz Gracia. I am founder of the Mind, Body, Spirit Network, and I'm also its editor-in-chief. And today we have a very special and interesting guest. Her name is Holly Scalmanini. Did I say that properly, Holly?
It's Scalmanini.
Scalmanini, I'm sorry. I've spoken to you enough. I should get it straight, for goodness sakes. And Holly Scalmanini is a certified medical intuitive and licensed acupuncturist. And she's been giving intuitive readings for the past 7 years, and has been mentored by noted psychics like Karen Fox, Julie Cobb, and Nicole Sacitella. That's a mouthful of Italian going on there. And I really, my first question was, when did you start to perceive these gifts that you have, Holly? That's always pretty interesting to me. Like, when did this all start to happen?
Well, that's a really good question, and I think it happened piecemeal throughout my life. When I was a kid, I had a lot of interesting experiences that now that I'm an adult, I can look back and realize that that was a psychic experience. My mom kept a journal of when I was like 3 and 4 years old, and one of the journal entries said that she had to be very careful about her moods because I would take on her mood if she wasn't careful about that. And once I told her something that there was no way that I could have known, and she asked me, how did I know that? And I told her, I hear it in my mind. And I think I was just 4 years old. I had just turned 4 years old.
Cool.
So it started early. And but when it really began was in my early 20s. I was working as a physical therapist aide, and I started putting my hands on people. And when I would put my hands on people, I would perceive things that I otherwise would not have known. I would perceive things like that their marriage was in trouble, or that they had a difficult childhood, or that they were depressed, things like that.
Now, would you share that with people at that time, or you just kind of took it in and...
Well, it was really hard because you're in a situation where I shouldn't know this, and how do I say this? And I'm like 22 years old, and so a lot of these people, I don't know how seriously they took me. So it was really hard, and that's actually really, I think, the skill of becoming an intuitive and being able to give a good intuitive reading is being able to deliver that information that you perceive in a way that it's productive and helpful and compassionate. So yes and no. Sometimes I would say things, I have memories of really throwing people off, and honestly, I had people, in my acupuncture practice, I had people leave my practice because I said things that it was too much.
Yeah.
And so that's part of what pushed me into realizing that I needed to do this so that people knew that that's what they were getting into when they came to see me.
Oh.
Was that I was going to be able to see things, and I needed to be sort of out of the psychic closet, as many psychics talk about.
Right.
And so that's what I did.
Out of the closet. I came bursting out of a closet I wasn't even aware of. I'm like, holy moly, what's going on here? So I really find the whole medical intuitive side of things really fascinating, and the ability to share some really valuable information for people, especially if they're going into major surgery or they're getting diagnosed with some life-threatening thing. It really came to me like, oh my God, I would go see someone like Holly immediately. So before we get into that, why don't you tell us what a medical intuitive is? And I think most people out there with some general awareness are familiar with Carolyn Mace. She's one of the most noted medical intuitives, I would think. Do you think that's fair to say?
Well, she's the one that coined the term.
And okay. Well, there you go.
She wrote the book Anatomy of the Spirit, which in my opinion is sort of the foundation for medical intuitive.
Oh, cool. So, and
Yeah,
isn't Edgar
yeah.
Casey really like the first father of that type of science?
Oh, yeah,
Or,
yeah. I think that term wasn't around when he was around, but absolutely, Edgar Casey would be in that line. Judith Orloff is another person she's actually an MD, but she's a psychiatrist, and she considers herself an intuitive healer. So, a lot of it's semantics, a lot of it's words that aren't really well defined or don't have a good definition yet. Carolyn Mace, Mona Lisa Schultz is another one.
Yeah.
Louise L. Hay, Hay House Radio. Her book, You Can Heal Your Life, has a whole section of physical ailments and then the emotional component behind it. So those are all, I think, pioneers in the field of what I would define as medical intuition as linking the physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies.
Cool. So is Louise a medical intuitive? Or
I don't know.
She just got it?
I think that she considers herself more someone who publishes and markets and puts out there people who are medical intuitives. But her book is dead on.
It's huge. I know. I'm reading it. It's on my table right now, and I've had it for years.
I love it. And so, I'm not sure where she came up with that information. I can't remember how she gleaned the information, that cold sores are bitter unspoken words, which...
Yeah, and she says that most alternative health people that ascribe to that book find that 95% of those issues are accurate.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't want to get ahead of us. Let's lay some groundwork first before we go nuts. So let's talk about what a medical intuitive is. Like, how would you define that?
So the way that I define it, the way that it happens for me, and I don't think that this is true for everyone. I think that different intuitives perceive and do readings differently. But the way that it happens for me is when I sit with someone, I'm generally aware first of the energy flow of their body, and that comes to me in a couple of different ways. I see chakras, and I see the balance of energy flow within that chakra. And I see, as an acupuncturist, I see the Chinese medicine meridians, I see the Chinese medicine organs, and I see the energy flow within the meridians and organs and how that energy is flowing, whether it's balanced or stuck or deficient, etc. And so I generally perceive the flow of energy within the body. I also am able to see emotions and life situations that pertain to certain illnesses or ailments. And then often I'm able to see the physical ailment or where the blockage is happening within the body. So that's how it manifests for me.
So I find your skills pretty fascinating. I have to say I've met a lot of people like you that are gifted in healing, alternative healing, spiritual mediums, but you're like one of the most powerful ones I've met. I just have this feeling of like, whoa, there's a lot of information coming to you quickly, it seems.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate you saying that, and I think that's true, and yes.
Because you mentioned it's almost like a floodgate opens when someone invites, comes in to see you. Like you can't stop the water. It's like you stop in the ocean that's behind your head, right? The information just comes, right?
Yeah, that's true. And that's part of what pushed me from being an acupuncturist into being an intuitive reader. Because as an acupuncturist, I would sit down with somebody, especially for the very first time, and it would be like I was having two conversations. Oh. So it's like I was having the conversation physically with them. They're telling me their physical symptoms and what's happening. And then there's a second conversation going on behind the scenes in my mind's eye, telling me all of these other things that are happening and related to what's going on. And what I found was that when I was able to find ways to talk with people about what I was perceiving, it was very healing and very transformational for them, very much helping them move forward. And so that's what brought me into becoming an intuitive as opposed to an acupuncturist.
Wow. That's, one of my other spiritual medium friends. I feel like her gift is the healing part of it. Even though she connects with spirit and tells you what you need to hear, it's like really the healing that's happening is even more profound than what she's saying.
I feel when I start my day with a half an hour of meditation and connecting with my spirit guides and connecting to the energy of the people that I'm about to read for. And what happens for me in that time is I feel very connected. I feel very connected to source and to divine energy. And it's really a lovely space to be in. And so I feel that when I'm reading for others, I share that connectedness with them. And I don't necessarily feel like that comes from me. I feel like that comes from beyond me. Yeah. And I get the pleasure and the honor of sitting in it and sharing it with others.
Yeah. Which I think is important when, I didn't really give much credence to any this type of thing 10, 15 years ago. I thought it was all baloney,
Yeah, I do.
Until I awakened to it in a big way. I'm like, okay, this is not baloney. And what's interesting about it is that there's no thought involved from you or me, for that matter.
Yeah.
If you get information, it's just, there's no ego getting in the way thinking through,
right.
Unless you stop to think about it.
Yeah.
You just kind of let it come out.
Absolutely. Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who started the Shambhala organizations throughout the United States and throughout the world, and he is Pema Chodron's teacher.
Oh.
And one of my favorite teachers. He passed in the 80s, so I never met him, but his books and his teachings and what he has to say has had a big effect on me. And one of the things that he talks about is first thought. And I think another way of saying that is intuition, where you're not thinking something through. And I believe that we are all psychic, that we are all very intuitive, and that it's a skill. It's something like math. The more you do and the more you practice, the better you get, and that everyone has the potential to be good at it. And first thought is intuition. First thought is that space of, I'm not thinking about it, I'm just going with what comes to me first. And it's when we start to think that through that we start to backtrack and get afraid and pull back from what our inner voice is actually saying to us.
Yes.
So
we got to remember that first thought. Like the best time to get a first thought is in the morning when you're waking up, I think.
Yes. And I think that the veil between our world and the world beyond is the thinnest, very first thing in the morning at dawn time.
That's like a running movie for me. When I just wake up, I'm like, hey, there's a lot coming in right now.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
All right.
By your bedside.
I always forget. I'm like, oh, that was good. And then I'm like, oh, what was that? So people, I think there's a big difference, I think, and maybe you agree or not, between psychics and mediums. Or do you see a difference?
So again, we're getting into semantics and we're getting into words that just aren't well defined. I would use psychic and medium interchangeably. One of my teachers, Karen Fox, said that she really loved ESP, extrasensory perception.
Yeah.
Because she felt like that defined all of this the best. And ESP was something that was used a lot, I think, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And then somehow that term just went away.
I know. That's how I would use it. I'm like, what? It's really another way to communicate.
It is. It's extra. It's essentially perceiving beyond the five senses. And I really believe that everyone has had moments in their lives where they are perceiving beyond their five senses. They have a knowing, they have a gut feeling.
Yeah.
In fact, Karen Fox wrote a book about famous people and their intuition. Harriet Tubman was someone who she would talk about having dreams during the day that would tell her where to go to get the slaves that she was taking out of the South. Conrad Hilton, who's the CEO of all the Hilton hotels, he called himself Hilton's Hunches, and he would have all these hunches about different stocks, and that's all being psychic.
I love that, Hilton's Hunches.
So, yeah, and so I think that we've all had those moments of knowing. You have this gut feeling, you have this knowing, and that's first thought, that's intuition, that's being a psychic. I would say that's also being a medium, although generally the word medium refers to someone who is specifically speaking to those souls who have passed on.
Okay.
But I still think that, we're talking about terms that aren't well defined and maybe need to be better defined in society.
So do you feel like when you're getting information that there is another being speaking to you, or you're just feeling more the energy of the patient in front of you is speaking to you by their vibration?
That's a great question. So I feel when I am able to speak to souls who have crossed over, which is not my forte, but that does happen for me at times.
Mm-hmm.
That is when I fully feel another being, and I actually hear, it's the clairaudience, so I'm actually hearing their voice more. And I will also hear their spirit guides or my spirit guides or the person that's sitting in front of me, their spirit guides more if I'm acting as a medium and reading for someone who has crossed over.
Okay.
Now, if I'm doing more of a medical intuitive reading, which is more my forte, and I'm sitting with someone, I feel I'm tuning into their energy much like we tune into a TV or radio waves. Our physical body has an enormous electromagnetic field that can be perceived, that can be measured. And so essentially I am just tuning into that energy, and usually I get images in my mind's eye. That's when I see pictures. It's almost like a dream.
You're right.
Pictures, and then I decipher those pictures. And
which I think is probably, that's more in your line of work, that's really more vital information because it's coming direct from the person.
Yeah.
Metaphysically.
Coming from their energy.
Yeah, not anyone else interfering or...
Yeah, and there are times when their spirit guides will intervene and come forward and want to share information.
Oh, okay.
But so it's a little different. But I feel when it's medical intuitive reading, I'm honing into their electromagnetic field or energy field.
So when you're doing a reading, what kind of information do most people want? What do they not? Do a lot of people coming to you not wanting to hear what you want to share? Because I know I didn't want to hear from you. I'm like, I don't think I'm ready for this. I got my own stuff I'm working on. I'm going to clean up my mental yard before I come see you.
I think that's a great question. And I think that in an intuitive reading, what you are opening up to, and this takes a tremendous amount of courage and vulnerability, but what you're opening up to is the lightest of your light, your highest potential, and the darkest of your dark. The parts of yourself, parts of ourselves, myself included, that we deny, that we don't want to see, that we don't like.
Right.
And all of that shows up in intuitive reading.
Ah.
So it varies widely what I see depending on who's sitting in front of me. It always depends on them and where they are in life and what's going on. So
what are the different, when you're giving someone a reading, you have some information to share. If it's serious, what would be your next steps to take? Do you, how do you help them heal?
So yes, great question. I believe that the definition of healing is the ability to move forward in life. We tend to think of healing as the absence of physical symptoms, which it can be. And often is. However, I've met so many people who have chronic illness or terminal illness who are vital and healthy and happy in their heart and in their soul. And so I feel that healing has more to do with moving forward in life as opposed to your symptoms going away. Because from where I sit, those symptoms are information. Those symptoms are your body's way of telling you how your energy flow and how you're managing life is out of balance.
Ah.
So it's information, it's feedback. So I'm forgetting the question now.
So would you prescribe a treatment to someone or make
Okay,
suggestions
yeah.
as to
So
next
getting into
step?
the diagnosis piece, so the way that I perceive illness is more having to do with energy flow. The diagnoses that we often receive from medical doctors a lot of times are putting us into a certain category so that it's viable to treat someone.
Yep.
And when I sit with someone intuitively, I often don't see that. However, what I see is I see imprints of diseases. I see potential for diseases. And I see the emotional component behind those and the life situations that are creating those diseases. And that's what I focus on. I'm not qualified to diagnose someone. I would never sit across from someone and say, you have cancer.
Right.
What I would sit across from someone and say is, I see an imprint, an energetic imprint for cancer if you don't stop smoking.
Ah, good. So there is some type of potential remedy.
Yes. Yeah. And then I always ask, so the way that I structure that is I always look at where it came from. So if I see cancer, if I see diabetes or something like that, I always look at where did it come from? How did we get here?
Ah.
And so that could be childhood, that could be past lives, that could be choices that you've made in adult life. And then I look at where we are now, what's happening now, and then I look at how do we move forward? How do we go forward from here in a way that can heal? And that often includes seeing a doctor. I'm very much a proponent of our current medical system. I think that the drugs that we have available to us and the surgical procedures we have available to us are extremely valuable. And so I feel like I'm one member of a person's team.
Right.
And
have you come across medical doctors that are open to your suggestions?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I work with medical doctors. They refer to me.
Oh, good.
They refer people to me. And when they're in a place, they have seen me themselves, and when they're in a place where they feel like they're not able to help someone, they will send them to me in the hopes of getting more clarity about what's happening for them, for that particular person.
So do you feel like there's always an emotional or some type of belief going on as part of that equation, or not?
No, not always.
Oh.
Not always.
Okay.
Sometimes it's physical. Sometimes it's environmental.
Oh.
Sometimes it's more, food related. Sometimes it really is just more physically related.
Oh. Okay.
But it's rare for someone to seek me out. I think normally people who are drawn to me and people who are feeling like I need to see her, they generally have more layers happening than just that physical component.
I
But
see.
I don't think that there's always an emotional component.
Okay. Or beliefs or
beliefs or life situations.
I mean, you bring in past lives. There's a whole other.
There's a whole other.
Oh my goodness.
And I think it can get very layered and complicated, and I don't think that I have the final say on any of that. I think I'm just perceiving what I see in that moment, and I think it can be anything. And sometimes, sometimes it is truly just a physical issue.
Yeah. Cool. So, what do you think the What do you think the benefits are of receiving a medical intuitive reading?
I think that receiving a medical intuitive reading can bring clarity to your current life situation. It brings clarity to your life's purpose, your life's direction, to your sacred contracts. It brings clarity to your relationships. All of those things relate to your health and to your physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual well-being. And an intuitive reading brings light to all of that. It shines the light on all of that and brings clarity. And then from that clarity, we get insight and direction as how do you move forward? What do you do from here to work with the current life situation, to work with the current health situation? emotional situation, relationships, etc.
Okay. So you mentioned sacred contracts. Could you talk a little bit more about that? I'm like, what the heck do we have a contract for? That doesn't make sense. If we have free will, we're coming in here. I don't want to sign any contract. I want my free will.
And we all do have free will.
Okay, good.
So Sacred Contract is actually a book by Carolyn Mace. Oh. And everything that I'm about to say, I give her full credit for. She has really brought this idea of sacred contracts, at least as far as I know, into our collective consciousness. And when I read, I see these things. And so I agree with what she has said, and maybe that's because I believe it myself, and so that's why it comes to me. I don't know.
So what does a sacred contract look like?
So sacred contracts, and for those of you out there, if you're curious, please read her book. She also has an audio companion with it that's really great. So sacred contracts are based in the belief that we live many lives and that as a soul we are progressing and learning, and that we come down here to Earth School, again a Carolyn Mace term, Earth School, to learn and to progress and to grow as a soul. And so we set up certain life situations and certain people and certain contracts to help us on that journey of growth and learning.
Oh. So it's really kind of an outline of, I don't know, personalities or situations that they're going to help you move through something or learn.
Yeah. Well, and I think, this is in so many different ways. So in Chinese medicine, there's 5-element theory, which is essentially a very similar theory that you choose to be a certain personality type, or constitution is what we say in Chinese medicine, that sets you up for certain life lessons. So, for example, if you are a wood constitution, which is the liver and gallbladder in Chinese medicine, that relates to the emotion of anger. Wood constitutions tend to be good leaders. They're moving towards a place of learning to be more spontaneous. And so you have sort of where you move in and then where you're moving towards. Myers-Briggs type indicator is another very similar
I've seen that, yeah.
Enneagram. All of those things have a very similar belief system. Carl Jung and his archetypes, where we're all on the hero's journey. We are all overcoming certain things. We're all overcoming certain tendencies so that we can live our lives to the highest and fullest potential, which really means to blossom, to open up, to grow. And so that's the idea behind a sacred contract.
Okay. So just a few more questions for anyone that's interested in doing an intuitive reading or a medical intuitive reading somewhere down the line. So how do you I think you mentioned this earlier when you talked about when you go into, you set up your intentions before you meet your clients that day. So, so do you just kind of tune into that person, or you tune into everyone as a group, or how does that work?
Well, what I do when I start my day, what I'm doing is I'm tuning into my own spirit guides and to the souls that are helping me heal. I'm trained in Reiki, and so I also bring a lot of Reiki energy in, which I feel is very healing energy. And that's what I'm doing at the beginning of the day. And then at that point, I say the names of everyone that I'm going to be working with, and I ask for healing energy for all of those people. But then a few minutes before the reading, I'm tuning in specifically with the person that I'm reading for and really honing into their energy and looking at them more specifically.
Now, most of your readings, are they done remotely, like kind of like this, like on Skype, or are you doing them in person, or what's going on?
Yeah, most readings, I would say, are over the phone or with Skype,
okay.
Or but I do readings in person as well.
And location does not matter with your gift?
Right. And sometimes it's actually easier with people remotely.
Right.
I don't get any nonverbal feedback.
Oh,
so
cool.
it's a little clean psychic.
Good, clean fun.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, do you feel like we're entering a new era of medicine and healing? I mean, certainly what you do is pioneering in nature.
I do, and Dr. Oz says that the future of medicine is energy medicine.
Oh.
And I agree. I think that we're entering into a time where it's important for each of us individually to take responsibility for our lives, our decisions, our choices, and our health. And that we have a team of healers around us, alternative healers, conventional medical doctors, intuitive healers, whoever we feel drawn to, that we get information from. But ultimately, because we ourselves know our bodies best, it's up to us to make the wise decisions and do what's best for ourselves, which I think is more aligned with the Aquarian era, which I think is what we are moving into. Whereas what it used to be in the Piscean era is you went to see the doctor and you just did whatever the doctor told you, without asking questions, without, sort of assuming that the doctor knew your body better. But I think we're shifting into a time where it's important for us to take our health and healing into our own hands, take responsibility for ourselves, and to listen to what everyone has to say and then make the best decision for ourselves. Based on our own intuition, based on our own listening to our own bodies.
Yeah, instead of giving it all away.
Mm-hmm.
So when did the age of Aquarius start? I forget. It already started, didn't it?
So here's what I have understood and heard about that, and I'm not an expert on that, and so other people may have more information than I do, but what I understand is that it began on 11/11/11.
Oh.
2011. That it officially began that day. But I've also heard that it's going to take 300 or 400 years for the transition to take place completely.
Oh my God.
Because the Piscean era, what I heard initially was that we're going backwards through the zodiac in 2,000-year cycles.
Oh.
And I think this came from Carolyn Mace in an audio of hers, but maybe not. I can't remember now. So we started with Cancer, and we're going through 2,000-year cycles. So Aries was 2000 BC to 0 BC, and that's the age of pyramids and Egyptians, and more of a sacrificial. It's interesting if you look at cultures all over the planet at that time, even though those cultures didn't communicate, they were all sacrificing animals and people to the gods. It was different, and then you come into, from 0 BC to 2000 is the age of Pisces. And I think the age of Pisces is a time of hierarchy. It's a time of survival. And the best way to survive is from one person being in charge and a chain of command underneath. And so essentially that translates into an energy of an individual supporting the tribe. And the highest good that an individual can do is to support the survival of a tribe. And war, giving yourself self-sacrifice in war is the highest good that you can do. And a lot of what I'm saying here comes from Carolyn Mace's book, Why People Don't Heal and How They Can. So if anybody wants more information about that.
Okay.
But as we transition into the age of Aquarius, I think that we're moving into a time where it's more about the tribe supporting the individual. And it's about the individual moving forward and listening to what they feel was best for them for their own personal and spiritual growth, and the tribe supporting them in doing that. So it's sort of the inverse, and we're right at the very beginning of this sort of very tumultuous shift.
Yeah.
And what I see from an energetic perspective is a lot of people working with third chakra issues right now, which have a lot to do with self-esteem and self-worth and a sense of putting themselves first. And that tends to be a very difficult thing for us to do, myself included. And we feel guilty about that, and there's a lot of emotion that comes with that. And I think it's because there's thousands of years of collective consciousness that tells us not to do that.
Right.
And so illnesses can come up around the because of this this lack of energy in the third chakra, the lack of strength in the third chakra. It's, I think, sort of a collective thing that a lot of us are going through right now.
Yeah. So that's a whole other topic we're going to hit in another episode. But thank you for bringing it up. That's okay. Yeah, we definitely want to talk about the chakras. Those are big. So one last thing to wrap it up here, Holly. What are your goals as an intuitive healer in helping the community and global community grow?
So my goal as an intuitive healer is always self-awareness. I believe that the best way for us to heal within ourselves, to heal the relationships we have with others, and to heal our relationship with the earth is to be aware of ourselves, aware of our actions, aware of our words. And an intuitive reading is a great way to become more self-aware. When we are aware of the words that we speak and the actions that we say and how that affects others, we tend to be more kind to ourselves, to others, and then consequently those around us. That multiplies out into local communities and global communities.
Nice. Ripple effect.
Yeah, and so that's what I see.
Cool.
I feel I contribute to that.
Well, you absolutely do. I saw it the day I met you with my dog on the walk in the park.
Yes.
And really, we got to trust Edie's here too. We got to share Edie.
Hi, Edie.
Because Edie is who got Holly and I together in the first place, right, honey? Edie's really the most intuitive of all of us here.
Yes, that's actually true.
She knew something had to happen. All right, so how can you get a hold of Holly Scalmanini? Well, below this video, you're going to see links to her membership listing in the Mind, Body, Spirit Network, links to our podcast so you can listen again and find her episode that we're going to do on the chakras. That's going to be a doozer. I like the chakras. And then we'll have links to her website and social media. However, we'll make sure you can get a hold of Holly. So thank everyone for joining us today.
Thank you.
And Holly, so great having you. I can't wait to talk about the chakras.
Thanks for having me.
Woohoo!
Thank you.